Let's talk some football, Mark, as the college football season enters week number 11. The NFL season enters week 10. And things are starting to get interesting around football. It's a fun time of year.
It's really a fun time of the year. College football right now, two of the college football playoff poll rankings already out. We've got some unusual games with unusual spreads in those particular football games involving some of those football teams. And there's a lot also going on the National Football League side of things. But let's jump into the college to start the show. What do you say?
Yeah, I haven't yet watched any of the playoff rankings or anything like that. So I'd be interested. Well, as we go along, you can kind of fill me in and it's just because I just don't really believe in it. Just like I don't believe in the polls until there's like a couple of weeks left into the season. That's when I really start paying attention to find out what really matters. Because as we said last week, everything takes care of itself. Teams are gonna lose, and just look at Alabama. I mean, Alabama has 2 losses and they're done. I mean, it says they're 50-1 to win the national championship, but they might as well be 200-1. I mean, teams would have to fall apart all over the place, and that's just not going to happen. It's incredible that with Bryce Young, he's not going to win a national championship. It's amazing.
It is. He wins a Heisman Trophy, but not a national championship. And a lot of discussion in Alabama these days, even to the point where some of the crazies in Alabama are calling for Nick Saban's resignation, which is
those people need to be lined up and shot,
sized up for straitjackets.
Yeah, you're more kinder than me.
Yes. I don't believe in capital punishment, so that's why.
Yes, that could. I mean, I wouldn't even have if somebody even brought that up. I'm like, okay, just get away from me. You don't even get an opportunity to talk.
Yeah.
That's just nonsense. Okay, but I hear you. And that's Alabama for you. I was talking to Ryan Fowler, and he does I think it's a 4-hour daily show at Tuscaloosa Radio. I talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me that even like in February, or let's say it's February, and he wants to talk some college basketball. Like, this is what he learned early on when he got the job there. He found out that it was like, man, you're not going to last long here if you're going to talk college basketball in February.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen unless Alabama, and even if Alabama's basketball team is good, which they aren't usually, they don't even care unless they make a run to the Final Four, maybe. That's how it's all football, and it's college, and it's Alabama. But look, it was like that way for a long time, but it definitely just ramped up just incredibly when Nick Saban took over, and it's just amazing.
Absolutely. They live, breathe, and die football. Understandable. And, it's one of the reasons they're the kingpins in the Southeast Conference, because they brought the college football's top head coach to run that program. He does the best job recruiting players and doing just that, and he wins national championships. So they keep feeding the fans, and they're just eating it up.
I want to remind everybody, if you enjoy the videos, please subscribe. Very easy. Hit that button on the bottom of the screen. And speaking of buttons on the bottom of the screen, you see that thanks button. Anytime for any of our shows, for any reason, if you'd like to donate to our channel, please, we appreciate that, because we're building something really special here as far as all of our programming. NASCAR, horse racing, football, obviously. We're starting to get into the NFL draft, believe it or not. We've already posted our first 2 NFL draft shows for 2023. So we got a whole lot going on here. Thanks button, that gives you an opportunity to donate anything that can help us out with our programming and our analysts and our locations and things of that nature. And speaking of channels, of course, Mark, you've got your Playbook Experts YouTube channel that is, now already a couple of months old.
Yeah, it's a couple of months old. It's growing slowly but surely. We're getting a lot of positive response from that. It's filled with information, winning picks, selections, and handicapping theories and thoughts from the cast of Playbook Experts. So check it out, our Playbook Experts YouTube channel.
And again, that's you get free content, advice, expert analysis. So it's not a show about, hey, we're just going to pitch you on what to purchase regarding our information. And yes, there's some of that, but 90% of your programming is about breaking down the games in the NFL and college football and giving free picks and free information that you can't get anywhere else based on all of the years of experience that you guys have between you and Jim Feist and Victor. It's just amazing. And Andy. So it's amazing. Let's talk about the playoff picture, Mark, because with Georgia beating Tennessee, and that was a disappointing performance from Tennessee. Georgia showed up. Tennessee didn't. And I think it was more along the lines of Tennessee. I don't know. Maybe it was a predictable way that Georgia won the game. Anytime you face those high-powered offensive teams in football, that's how you beat them. You beat them with physicality. You beat them at the line of scrimmage, and that's exactly what Georgia did in the game. But we said it last week, and I still believe it today, that Tennessee, as long as they don't do anything stupid, because their schedule is pretty simple. As long as they don't do anything stupid, I think they're still going to find themselves back in the playoffs as the second SEC team.
Well, they could well do just that. And you brought out a good point about beating these good teams. You do it with physicality. It's like a bully. You knock him back on his heels, and all of a sudden he's not as much of a bully. It's the same thing in college football, and that's what Tennessee ran into against the Georgia Bulldogs last week. Georgia's been there, done that. They've got this ferocious defense, and it really, really ended up paving the way to victory for them last week. As far as Tennessee making the playoffs with one loss, that's going to be the hot topic subject from now until the playoff teams are announced on December 4th, because there are only going to be no more than 3 undefeated football teams. We've got 4 now, but Michigan and Ohio State are going to play one another. So at the most, 3 undefeated football teams, leaving at least 1, possibly 2, and maybe even 3 one-loss teams. And who's to say if a 2-loss team like in Alabama,
That's not going to happen.
Doesn't come in, sneak in, and snag that spot. So there's a first time for everything, Greg.
Yeah. Imagine the outcry if that happened.
Oh, unbelievable. I mean,
that's. And TCU being one of those undefeated teams, it's just not going to happen more than, look, they've had a nice run. We'll talk about their game in a little bit, but at some point you think they'll probably lose. So you're looking at 2 undefeated teams more than likely in the championship and in the playoffs, Georgia and the winner of the Big Ten. And that would leave it open for Tennessee to get in. And now with Alabama kind of out of the way, which we didn't count on, that opens the door. And look, Clemson, I think, is also done, because I think the way they lost, we have talked about it, that, look, they had a comeback to beat Syracuse at home. They beat Wake Forest in overtime. Those aren't bad teams. But ACC is not a very tough conference, and you almost have to go undefeated in the ACC to get to the playoffs to get enough respect. And so I give Alabama 2 losses a better chance than Clemson with 1 loss, to tell you the truth. So that opens it up for a Pac-12 team. If they could run the table from now until then, anybody that runs the table gets a legitimate chance of the playoffs. And then you also have to think that the worst thing that could happen for Tennessee is if LSU goes on a run. Because if LSU somehow wins the SEC championship game against Georgia, they'll go LSU and Georgia first, knocking Tennessee out. I don't think LSU would beat Georgia, but we didn't think LSU would beat Alabama, so anything is possible. And Brian Kelly did it, and we said LSU was a sleeper in the beginning of the season, and they sure paid off. What an incredible atmosphere and an incredible football game last Saturday night.
Well, it's all because of their head coach. It's still just a winner. Wherever he goes, he wins. And, that will happen. If LSU wins the Southeast Conference, wins out, there'll be a 2-loss Southeast Conference champion. Then there will be a lot of decisions that have to be made. Do you take a 2-loss LSU football team against a 1-loss defending national champion Georgia Bulldog team? Or, do you opt for a 1-loss Michigan team if they lose to Ohio State, or a 1-loss Ohio State team if they lose to Michigan? A lot of questions here. But, the funny thing here, Greg, is this is the last year we're going to be talking about.
Yes.
Because it's going to be all wide open next year for 12 playoff teams. So, this isn't even a conversation next year. Then the conversation next year is how many 3-loss teams will be in that 12-team package. Right?
Yeah. I'm okay with that, but that's next. That's in 2 years, actually. I think we have 1 more year of this,
right.
And then we get into the big playoff scenario, which is kind of cool. All right. So anyway, I think this just makes it a lot more fun, and because no Dabo Sweeney, no Nick Saban, and these guys are usually one of the two who's been in the playoffs like the last 10 years, however long it's been. So it really makes it quite interesting. But yeah, huge win. And I thought that was it Fowler and Herb Street. What were they thinking when Brian Kelly made the decision to go for 2? How on earth did they not reference what happened in the beginning of the season to Brian Kelly when he opted to go for the kick, the extra point, and the guy missed the extra point, and they couldn't even go to overtime? They didn't reference that. They completely forgot. That was the reason Brian Kelly went for 2, because he remembered what happened early in the season. That was a huge reason why Brian Kelly... Look, he might have done it anyway, but that was almost like, I'm not sending my kicker out there to miss an extra point again, like on week 1. I'm going for it, and I'm taking the 2 points, and if we lose, we lose. But we're losing with at least giving ourselves a chance offensively to win the football game. Can't believe they forgot all about that.
Well, it's that adage, if you will, Greg, you don't put your hand back in the fire after your hand got burned in the fire. And Brian Kelly was not going to risk that, obviously, at all. So it's a great point you bring out that they fell asleep on that subject or that topic. But it's still, I think hats off to Brian Kelly and the great job that LSU has done as far as this football season here. I think personally they're in for a little bit of a struggle this week, but bottom line here is they got themselves in a position they control their own destiny as we speak.
Georgia's even money to win the national championship. I'm not interested in that. I'm not even interested in Ohio State at 2-1. Not interested. So if I was wagering today, you have Michigan 8-1. You have Tennessee 12-1, Oregon 25, LSU 40. If you think USC at 50-1 or UCLA at 100-1 were to run the table, and you have, I think I mentioned LSU at 40-1. So I'd throw money on a bunch of those long shots, and I'd stay away from Ohio State and Georgia. Not saying that they can't be playing for the national championship and Georgia winning it. That's not my point. It's that those numbers are too low with a lot of football left. I think I could just wait it out and see what happens. And especially with the way the season's unfolded, it could happen. It's still going to be very hard for Georgia to repeat. It may look easy right now because of the way they beat Tennessee, but Nick Saban doesn't win back-to-back national championships all the time. So what do you think? Georgia's going to do it? Just snap of the finger? It's not going to be easy, and especially they're going to have to do it where it's going to be away from that home field advantage was also a big piece of the game, no question. And if they play Tennessee again, it's a neutral site kind of situation. They're the best team. They should have been ranked number 1 when the playoffs rankings came out. That was stupid. And maybe they had bulletin board material, as you mentioned last week. They won't get that anymore. But like I said, I don't know if you agree with me, but I see no reason to put money on Georgia or Ohio State when the odds are so low.
No, because it's all about value, and you don't get any value with those two football teams, the teams that are expected to win. You want to find surprise sleeper teams. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't even think you mentioned the team that's most overlooked in this entire package, and that's TCU.
Yeah, 60-1.
Yeah, well, right now, 14-1, okay? Because they're undefeated. They're ranked number 4 in the country. And they still have to be in the talk, in the mix. I know they're a 7-point dog this week. We're going to talk about that. And they haven't won football games in very pretty fashion this year, but still in amongst one of 4 undefeated teams as we're speaking here today.
So you're saying that are you looking at a sports book that yours says 14-1?
That's correct. Yes.
Let me see what my sports book says, because DraftKings can definitely be different. Let me see if it's under here. No, you know what? I'm going to do this. Well, let's see what they got here for the Heisman. C.J. Stroud. They got the Heisman favorite here, C.J. Stroud. Hendon Hooker's still up here. Who was the favorite the other day? I forget. Oh, that's right. It was Bryce Young. Bryce Young is no longer. Bryce Young is now 60-1 all of a sudden to win the Heisman
because of 2 losses. That's the reason. He's going to be the number 1 pick in the whole draft next year, but still,
he certainly will.
But likely not to be in the college football playoff this year.
This sportsbook I have has TCU at 30-1. So if you go to the right sportsbook, who knows? It's ranging all over the place.
And that's what it is. It's all about shopping. The one where I saw that was, I believe, it might have been PointsBet. I'm not sure. But there was an article that was done, and it was done on my goodness, I think in NCAA.com. They were talking about the rankings, and they listed on the rankings, underneath the rankings, the odds of the football teams to win.
NCAA has their official website has Las Vegas odds. Wow.
Yes, that's my whole.
That's probably taking it a little too far. They must be getting paid for that.
I'm thinking. Would you?
Yeah.
Right.
That wouldn't make any sense otherwise.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this website's got Tennessee's odds a little bit better. Now we thought it could have been 20-1 last week if they lost, or 16-1 here. So, and look, we said it. If you did not take advantage of them when we recommended at 100-1, which was just before the Alabama game, they went down to 6-1 or 4-1 last week. I forget which one. So, and if you wait it out, good for you, because they're now 16-1. And again, I think they're going to end up in the playoffs. And at 16-1 right now, no way you're getting Tennessee at 16-1 if they make the playoffs. So
you're going to get any team at 16-1.
No,
that's right. Exactly.
Yeah. So all right. So that's that's what's going on. And I noticed also that there are some of the championship odds. Now let me ask you. This is a little bit better than last week, but ACC championship winner, North Carolina's plus 265. I don't think that's too bad, considering the fact that they're going to play in the ACC championship game, and I'm not so sure they're going to be plus 265 when they get there and face Clemson. I think it'll be less than that, don't you think?
Well, after they lose this week, it'll be more than that. So depends upon how you want to look at that. I think they got their hands full with Wake Forest this week, personally. The rotten defense that they have, 450-yard defense.
Yeah, it could be a game like SMU Houston.
Yes. Well, my goodness, yeah. That's a story all into itself,
The Big 12 championship, Baylor. I like Baylor there. Let's see, they're 5-1, and Kansas State's 8-1. Texas is less than 2-1 to win the Big 12 championship. And let's see, Big 10, forget that. Well, let's say Big 10. Now, don't you think if you think like most people will be Ohio State, Michigan playing in for the right to play in the Big 10 championship game, there's no way Michigan is going to be plus 350 in the game against Ohio State. So if you believe in Michigan or think, yeah, I think that's a coin flip game, that's a good wager right there, taking Michigan at plus 350 to win the Big 10.
Well, it'll be a little more than a coin flip game because it's at the Horseshoe, and they're going to likely be maybe a double-digit dog in the football game.
You really think it'll be Ohio State 10?
Yes.
Ow.
Yes.
I don't know about that, but that's interesting.
Yes, it is. More realistically,
that'll be about what, plus 265 maybe around there on the money line.
Maybe more realistically 8, but don't be surprised if they're 10. And that all depends upon how big and impressive they are in these next 2 games, both teams.
Pac-12, UCLA at 5-1 to win the Pac. That's probably the best bargain right there. Oregon State is 500-1. How's that even possible?
Well, I think they have to have a lot happen. I think a lot of chips have to fall their way. For them to even enter that particular. You're talking about winning the Pac-12 or making the
winning the Pac-12.
Yeah, well, there's 3 other teams that are much better than they that are more likely to be in that win the Pac-12 championship. Those being Oregon, Southern Cal, and UCLA. And I think Washington is a better team even than Oregon State is. So they're not a bad team, Oregon State, and they'll end up being in a mid-run bowl game. Probably like an 8 or 9 win team this year. So they've done a nice job turning the program around. But I still don't think they're quite Pac-12 championship.
Yeah. The loss last week pushed them out of contention, really. That was the one. And then you have, let's see, SEC. You have LSU at plus 350. So, yeah, no big bargain there. I don't think there's anything else worth it, unless you believe in Mississippi, because they're 80 to 1. But they would have to win this week. And, yeah, so those are, let's see, AAC. I don't think there's any bargain. Oh, yeah, here's one. Let me see. How about East Carolina at 12 to 1 to win the AAC?
Well, you know something? They've got Cincinnati Friday night,
Yes.
and I think Cincinnati's got their hands full in that football game.
If they win that game, they're in really good position.
Yes, they are. There's a lot of things against them. Obviously, Cincinnati's dominated them, especially at home. They're 11-1 in the series at home to the spread and all those types of things. But you've also got an East Carolina football team that's playing really, really good football. And these are the kind of games where these mid-run dogs, step up and pull upsets. So, and that might be a little bit of a value look there at East Carolina to win that AAC.
Yeah, well, here, how about this? Because the only other teams that could win it would be Houston, and they're playing Houston next week. SMU, and SMU's not going to – I don't think SMU's going to – let's see, SMU, because they haven't played SMU yet, but SMU schedule, they have a pretty – well, they go to Tulane next week. So if Tulane beats them, they're out. And then East Carolina has already beaten Central Florida. So if East Carolina beats Cincinnati this week, and they're a plus 170-ish on the money line, if they win that and run the table, so they beat Houston at home and they beat Temple on the road, the chances are very good that they will be in the championship game. And I'm getting 12 to 1 right now.
Yep, those are all great points. You're getting 12 to 1 with the team that would then have beaten Cincinnati and Central Florida.
Yes.
So a football team that
it's on a roll. They're playing their best football of the season too.
Yes, right. So they'd be deserving to be in that title game.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I would definitely look out for that one. CUSA. Just taking a look there at their odds, and what a game last week. Boy, Texas San Antonio, they just what a couple of years they've had. I mean, they've just won all the big games. Won an overtime thriller against UAB. It's looking like Texas San Antonio and North Texas. Big game coming up with North Texas and UAB this week for North Texas's sake. But let's say UAB beats North Texas, which is odds say they're supposed to. So let's say that happens. Then you have the other teams that would have potentially two losses are Western Kentucky, Florida Atlantic, and Rice. And Rice plays Western Kentucky. So let's say Western Kentucky wins that game, and FAU, let's say they win that game. So just taking a look at the odds for those other two teams besides North Texas, you have Florida Atlantic is 20 to 1, and Western Kentucky's 20 to 1. And one of those two teams could get into the Conference USA Championship game.
Well, Western Kentucky would be the team that I would not want to see in that championship game if I'm playing them, because they've shown the ability to play some really good football, and they could knock off a team that they're playing in the title game as well.
Yeah, so that's not bad. And in the Mountain West, you have the bargain there. Let's see, you have the bargains are San Jose State at 8 to 1 and Wyoming at 16 to 1. And then you've got the matchup next week between Wyoming and Boise, and it's in Wyoming. So if Wyoming can run the table and beat Boise, then they would get into the championship game. And again, considering they're 16 to 1 is something to keep an eye on. And San Jose State would need a Fresno loss, though. And I'm not sure the way they're playing with Jay Kaner at quarterback that's going to likely happen. But and they have to also would win out. So yeah, I wouldn't really go too crazy there. Wyoming would probably be the one that has the best shot because they're playing Boise State at home next week.
I agree. Boise's going to have to lose somewhere along the line for a surprise team to get there, and it could well happen at Wyoming. It's a pretty tough venue, and while you say Hayner's back and they're playing some pretty good football right now, it's still a real tough site to go in and out of Laramie, Wyoming. All
right, and then the Sun Belt, keep in mind now, my favorite college quarterback, Grayson McCall, is out for a few weeks. So with him being out, all of a sudden, you can't just bank on Coastal Carolina because they're only got a game and a half lead on Georgia State and James Madison, and Georgia State is 50-1 to win the Sun Belt, and they're only a game and a half behind Coastal Carolina without their starting quarterback. So that would be interesting, don't you think? Maybe 50-1. Hey, put a buck on them. Why not?
All because McCall's out for
Yes.
sure. For sure, because Georgia State is capable, probably not going to do it, but capable nonetheless. But because of the big injury here, it does keep the door open. That's a big take in that game. For that.
Yeah, they lost the 1-on-1, which puts them behind the egg. But if Coastal Carolina loses this week, then it really opens up the possibilities, because their last game of the season is at James Madison. Which would be very tough if Grayson McCall was not the quarterback. So really what you would be banking on with that 50-1 is a loss this week to Southern Miss. That's like your only chance if you're Georgia State. And for 50-1, I think it's worth it. Like I said, I throw a buck on Georgia State to win, because we've talked about how strong the East is over the West. And the West right now, it's between Troy and South Alabama. And the odds say Troy is even money to get there, but South Alabama is 8-1. Unfortunately for South Alabama, they lost to Troy, so they need a little help.
Well, I think that conference is rather kind of wide open, and a couple of nice teams in there. James Madison, even if they play, they can't qualify to play for a championship because it's their first year in the FBS. But they can be a spoiler, like you say, that last game of the season. Those losses still count against the opponent. So a lot of intrigue also in the Sun Belt Conference, which is a vastly improved conference this year.
All right. So now that we've gone through the playoff picture and all those odds, futures and stuff, let's just quickly run through the games, all the action. And I tell you what, one more thing before we do that. Let's talk about the recent firing. So another head coach is gone. And this is the biggest surprise for me, because I really felt that even though, and I understand why Jeff Scott got fired. The line was drawn when you get beat up by Temple. But let's keep in mind at South Florida, this was a huge rebuilding process. And you had your starting quarterback go down. You had some other key injuries. They had 2 games this year where they were heavy underdogs that they almost beat Florida in Florida. They had the Cincinnati game was really close. That was the other one. We know that they were getting closer, but they just didn't have the talent. And I don't understand this impatience. I understand it, but I don't. What is South Florida? Who do they think they are? I mean, something must be going on there with Jeff Scott behind the scenes that I don't understand why he didn't deserve another season.
Well, I think for openers, number one, he did bring back a wealth of experience, a lot of talent on the football team. So the expectations were quite a bit higher than what they've delivered here in the goods. And, like Bill Parcells says, you are what your record says you are. And I think that loss to Temple wasn't just a loss, it was a bad loss. And I guess they figured, hey, we're not going in the direction we want to go. Let's stop this train right now, and we're going to make this change. I was a little bit surprised as you, because I felt he had the potential to grow that football program, especially with the talent he had this year, which would only be better next year.
The other coaches that should be on the hot seat, Neil Brown. I kind of think this is it for Neil Brown. Don't you?
Well, he's going to need to pull an upset or two along the way. It'd be a big one here this weekend. He's sort of really a very likable guy, and I think they've endeared themselves to him. So, will it surprise me if he's fired? No, it won't. But I would kind of like to see them give him another year. He's in a really, really tough situation here because, he's playing in the Big 12, okay, and geographically,
it's ridiculous. They should not be in the Big 12.
No, not at all. Not at all. Put them in the Big East or
right.
The AAC.
ACC would be a lot better.
Exactly. The ACC would have been perfect for that.
Yes.
But nonetheless, they could be impatient because he hasn't delivered the goods, honestly, or the way that.
I guess it depends on what they value their football program. Like, do they think they're like the big boys or not? I don't know.
Well, sure they do, because they're a Power 5 conference team. So, and they think that probably they're better than a lot of teams in the Big 12 are. But the truth of the matter is they're not. But I do look for a big game for them, and we're going to find out whether this team wants to play for him and whether they want him back or not. They're a pretty good underdog this particular week, so let's see what happens here. I think if he's going to be fired, it will be after the end of the season.
Jeff Hafley, Boston College. You think he lasts?
Correct.
Very, very disappointing season. Very disappointing because you have a quarterback that people felt could be a top 3 round quarterback in the NFL, and you have a Zay Flowers who could be a top 3 round wide receiver. And I know they had offensive line injuries, especially with their best one. But it's been a bad season for Boston College, and it's been as bad as I've seen it at Boston College in a while. So that's why I wonder. He's been there a few years. He never had head coaching experience before. I wonder if they give him another year.
I'm looking to see if he got fired. I thought I had heard during the week he did.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. I didn't hear anything.
Let me see real quick here as we're talking about it. But I know he was obviously rumored to be. And no, it doesn't appear to be that way. I mean, the last post on the internet with him was October 31st, and he's confident about the future. So,
there's a lot of stuff out there about whether or not he should be fired. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's probably what is more being bandied about was whether or not he should be fired or not. But,
yeah. So
it just remains to be seen. It depends on what those expectations are, what the size of his contract was, everything like that. But they've fallen a little bit short, obviously, since they hired him.
Brady Hoke. Do you think San Diego State should be satisfied with Brady Hoke?
No, not at all. I can't figure out for the life of me, why Rocky Long left the program.
I know.
Really, yeah. And he left the program, my goodness, to go to be a defensive coordinator.
With his old school. Yeah.
Mexico. I mean, that's just more or less saying I took a rocking chair job.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have to go into those recruiting wars, but when they replaced him with Brady Hoke, that was not a forward move at all for this football program, and the results are showing it.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing in I know this. See, the stadium's an issue. When you play in an NFL stadium, especially now a stadium that even the NFL team ain't playing in anymore, it's just so big, and it's just not a good. There's just no college excitement there. It's tough. And I don't know if and I know how tough it is. I mean, San Diego, of course, they left there for a reason because they weren't going to build them a stadium. So they're not going to build the Aztecs a stadium. So I don't know. But I agree. You're in San Diego. That should be a good recruiting. I mean, when you're recruiting in the Mountain West with mostly cold weather programs, you would think, hey, come play for San Diego State, man. Look at the weather here. Why would you want to go to Utah or, Boise? Come play here. Oh, weather's great all the time. So
yeah, why you could be a surfer dude, rather than an Eskimo.
Yeah.
I get it. But you know something? Don't ever stop and try and figure out what happens in the state of California. They overwhelmingly, resoundingly defeated a sports gambling bill in the state of California. It's a state that needs money like yin needs yang. And they turned down sports gambling in the state of California. I'm sure it was all politics, and I'm sure it's not being paid enough money and so forth and whatnot. But, I was sort of shell-shocked when I heard that not only did they not pass the bill, it was overwhelmingly they didn't pass the bill. So that's California for you. That's all. I'll leave it at that.
All right, let's spend the next half hour running through everything quickly here, and then we're going to also wrap up a little bit of the NFL. So as you mentioned, LSU-Arkansas, that's a huge game for LSU after beating Alabama. So they're 3-0, straight up ATS in the last 3 games. They're taking on an Arkansas team coming off a tough loss to Liberty as a heavy favorite. The last 2 years, by the way, this rivalry has been decided by just 3 points. Both teams winning one of the other. I don't think LSU is going to. I don't think their season's going to be. All right, we beat Alabama, and now we're just going to lose the next week. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Brian Kelly's too good of a head coach. And maybe, who knows? Maybe they get off to a slow start. But I don't like the way Arkansas is playing this year generally. This is not as good as a team as they had last year. So I feel pretty good about LSU, and 3 points is not a lot to give up.
Well, I'm the other way. I think this is a real big flat spot for LSU. A couple pressure. Number one, they're feeling awfully good about what they did last week, and an Arkansas football team comes in off back-to-back losses who needs this game like blood. And you've also got a much better offense here with Arkansas in the contest coming in here. I think this is where upsets occur in games like this. The letdown after the big win to the hungry dog. I'll back the Arkansas Razorback.
By the way, if LSU loses, that's a 12 o'clock game, then the 3:30 game becomes monstrous because Ole Miss is hosting Alabama. And with Ole Miss losing to LSU, if LSU loses, then Ole Miss is in the driver's seat. And they would, of course, have to win the game against Alabama. Now, what they got going for them is that there's going to be a letdown situation. Speaking of letdowns, there's going to be a letdown situation in Alabama that we haven't seen in a long time. We don't know how they're going to handle this because realistically, they kind of know it's over. I mean, they just don't have a realistic shot, and they don't have time to prepare. It's like go after them. That's it. Next week, how you going to do? You got to go hostile territory. I think this is a tough spot. I like Ole Miss covering. Maybe I'll sprinkle a couple of bucks on the money line, but I'm not so sure Alabama's going to handle this very well. Let's keep in mind, they've been on the road this year, struggled against Texas, lost last week. They even had that Texas A&M game that was a really bad win for them. So yeah, I definitely take the points in this spot, and it's going to be interesting to see how Alabama responds in a scenario that they're just not used to.
Well, what Mississippi's not used to is winning a game by a margin. They've lost to us 5 in a row to Alabama by 15 or more points. And what you've got in Alabama here is the AP preseason number 1 ranked team off a straight-up favorite loss. We wrote about it in this week's Playbook football newsletter here and how well these AP preseason number 1 teams rebound in situations just like this. You've also got the Nick Saban against the former assistant coach angle at working here. And in games like this, when Saban comes into these football contests and he has the better record, he's 13-0 against those former assistants with only 3-point spread losses. I think Alabama is going to make a surge here from now until the end of the football season here. There's still a lot of talent on the team. I'm not ready to parachute out on them. And again, I'm not a big at all Lane Kiffin fan. I think he gets out-coached in most games that he plays. And I think we'll see that again on Saturday when he takes on Alabama.
I had an opportunity to talk to Neil McCready this week, who covers Ole Miss football for Rivals, so you can check that out on the channel. We talked about Lane Kiffin, whether or not he could be leaving for Auburn, and obviously we touched up on the game as well, so you can check that interview out on the channel. Georgia at Mississippi State, 16-point favorite, and they've dominated this series, but they lost the last time they played in Starkville, which was in 2010. These two teams don't play a whole lot very often. I don't know. This is it almost seems kind of easy. Georgia 16. They're clearly the better team. But speaking of letdown, what kind of a letdown do they have after the big win over Tennessee?
I think they've got a real tough task at hand this particular week. This is a Mississippi State football team that has been very good for pretty much of the football season here. An opportune time for them to reestablish themselves as being just that football team in an ideal letdown situation here for Georgia here. Georgia's feeling awfully good about themselves. They reclaimed that number 1 ranking clear across the board. The college football playoff polls, the AP, the coaches poll, they're number 1 clear across the board. But this is where teams get up for teams just like that, and I think Mississippi State will do just that. I think the last team that scores in this game wins the game.
Wow. So you think this is like the Missouri game?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Wow, that would open things up tremendously around college football. Big Ten and Illinois, just when they were firing on all cylinders, they laid an egg against Michigan State. It's probably one of those situations where they were reading all the headlines that we were all reading, that Michigan State, after the Michigan debacle and players transferring and suspended, and they must not have been up for the game, and it cost them. But they still have a lead. They still have a 1-game lead to get to the Big Ten championship game. And they got to take on Purdue this week as a 6.5-point favorite They lose this game, and they got to sweat things out the rest of the season because they got Michigan on the road next week, which they will lose, and then they'll be out of it. So they have to win this football game because all of a sudden, knowing that they probably lose next week, they're going to start to get into some tiebreakers. So Illinois really lost a lot of their advantage with that loss last week.
Yeah, that was a crushing loss for Illinois because they were really one of the best under-the-radar teams in all of college football this year. One of only 3 teams that are unbeaten in yardage this year, total yardage. They've not lost the stats in any football game they played. They won them again in that loss. Number 1 ranked team in defense, number 1 ranked team in scoring defense. So they have a lot of things they bring to the table in the contest, except for the fact that they haven't been this far before in doing these things they're being asked to do. I think at the beginning of the football season, before it even began, this game would have been a pick'em. Basically just based upon the names of the 2 football teams and not everybody expecting what Illinois has been thus far this football season. But I see the Illini bouncing back in a role like this. I think this is an opponent that they can handle here in Purdue. Purdue plays their pretty good football against teams that are satisfied, coming off of their satisfied wins. That's when they go in there as an underdog and they get sneaky wins or point spread covers. They're not taking on a satisfied opponent this week. They're taking on an opponent that's really pretty well PO'd. I think Illinois wins and covers this game.
Yeah, I still think Illinois is in good shape because Northwestern's their last game of the season on the road. And if they win this game, then you've got Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota. They're all like playing each other. So unless one of those teams, just wins out in a kind of way, then it still looks like Illinois has got a good shot because Wisconsin's at Iowa on Saturday. And I'm staying completely away from that game. I got no idea what to expect in that one. And Minnesota's at home against Northwestern as a heavy favorite. So, and Michigan and Ohio State are also playing games that they should have no problem. Let's go to the ACC, and now that Clemson lost, things, even though that's not a conference loss, any chance for a playoff team is pretty much done. Looking at this, Duke became bowl eligible last week. That was still a great story. Pitt needs to win for bowl eligibility. Miami, they just lose again. They got clobbered by Florida State, and they're now 0-8 against the spread on the season. So I'm sorry. I'm taking Georgia Tech. I've gone against Miami a whole lot this year because of that spread debacle, and it's just terrible. I mean, 0-8. You can't get worse than 0-8. And I wonder how they'll respond. I don't think they're going to respond very well. So I think Georgia Tech's a pretty decent play. And they got Louisville and Clemson should be a good football game because Louisville's playing their best football maybe under Scott Satterfield.
Yeah, 4 wins and covers in a row coming into this game with a lot of confidence for Louisville. And they're catching Clemson in what might be an ideal letdown spot. Or not a letdown spot, what I would call a bubble burst spot where they had that pin in their balloon and ruined their perfect season. Difficult to get back up in games like that. You mentioned Miami of Florida. I think the most disappointing team of all the Power 5 teams this year. And that 0-8 spread record speaks volumes because what that tells us is they're not even close to being anywhere near a good football team. The odds makers have overrated this football team from the get-go, and they continue to keep doing so. There's a lot of problems with this Miami football team. The only question I have is, can I trust Georgia Tech to lay points into this program here? That's going to keep me out of it, but don't be surprised if Miami makes it 9 straight point spread losses in a row.
Yeah, I see in some of the sports books they're pick 'em.
Yep.
So that's good, even better for Georgia Tech. And then maybe the best game is Florida State-Syracuse because Florida State coming off the big win. And Syracuse, they kind of need a win just to get off some of the ugly rust of losing 3 straight. Because they're home finale. So I think because of that, I think they're going to kind of regroup and make this close. I'm going to take the points and think that they're going to kind of try. And it's a night game, home night kind of deal. So I think it'll be a pretty close game.
Well, I agree with you. I think it will be a close football game. There's a lot of good football yet to be played in the ACC, and I think we're going to see a lot of it this particular weekend. And I'm looking for underdogs to bark up and really bark this week, and that could well be one of them.
In the Big 12, West Virginia could be an interesting upset play because Oklahoma is only 2-4 straight up, 1-5 against the spread in their last 6. West Virginia needs the win to maintain any bowl hopes. But look, a couple weeks ago, they almost beat TCU at home. So I could see this game being pretty close. Well, the Oklahoma State-Iowa State game, Iowa State's favorite at Oklahoma State, and they haven't even ruled out Sanders yet. I'm kind of surprised that Iowa State's the favorite here.
I mean, I don't know what they've completely given up on Oklahoma State all about. This is a football team a month ago that everybody was endeared with.
Yeah.
Looking like arguably the best team in the Big 12 Conference.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you put a pin in that balloon, and now all of a sudden you can't give them away.
It's crazy.
And this is an Iowa State team that a month ago couldn't beat a junior high school football team on that 5-game losing streak. I don't know what they've done to get any better here. I think this is a bad line, personally. Just for the line in the game, I looked at Oklahoma State in the contest.
Then you got two huge games, Kansas State and Baylor. Baylor's a 2.5-point favorite. As much as I've been over Kansas State, let's keep in mind that now this was my championship game prediction at the beginning of the season. Was it yours too? Did you have Kansas State and Baylor, or did you have Kansas State and someone else?
I didn't have Baylor because Baylor being the defending champion, I was going to be fading them all season long.
Oklahoma, maybe? Or
no, I don't think Oklahoma, because I wouldn't have bought Brett Venables, the new head coach, going in there. But I'm with you. I know for sure it might have been Iowa State. Honestly, it might have been them for me with the coach. But I know Kansas State was one of the two teams I had in the title game.
Okay, but I said it last week in the Oklahoma game. I just love the way Baylor's playing right now. I think they've got everything going for them. Aranda's got this team really looking like a championship team again. I just don't like the way Kansas State got off to that start last week. They're just a Jekyll and Hyde team. I don't know what you get out of Kansas State. One week they look like the best team in the Big 12. The next week they look like mediocre. I just think Baylor's a little bit more, straight ahead focused, and I just can count on Baylor more than I can on Kansas State right now.
That's a great way to put it. You can count on Baylor. You know what you're going to get from that football team. And you don't know what you're getting from a majority of the other teams in the Big 12 Conference. So steady, dependable Baylor Bear, would probably be worth a look in a football game like this because, they refuse to be intimidated and be attacked being that defending national champion. So I would agree with you. Right now, I think Baylor is likely either the best or the second best team in this conference.
And I think when they play at Texas at the end of the season, I think they're going to beat them. By the way, Texas, that's the big one. They host TCU. You know what? I'm not surprised. I know there might be people out there that think the line is crazy. TCU's undefeated. Texas is 6-3. How can this be a 7-point spread? But if you just look at the way that the way Las Vegas has endeared themselves to Texas this season, you're not surprised. I mean, this is okay. So because of that, I don't look at it as, oh well, what are they, crazy? Of course I'm taking TCU. No, I'm not looking at it that way. The reason I'm taking TCU is just because, well, why shouldn't I? I mean, they've played tremendous all season. Yes, Texas is a very good team. They might even end up being the best team in the Big 12. We don't know. And they're at home. And maybe TCU, it'll burst. Their bubble will burst, and when it bursts, it'll look really ugly. That's all possible, but I just can't pass up 7 points to the undefeated team that just keeps finding ways to win. So I have to take TCU in this spot.
Well, not only are you getting 7 points, you're getting 7 points from a 3-loss team in Texas. I can't believe that. I mean, we have a total of 5 3-loss teams that are ranked in the college football playoffs. 2 of them in the top 20, Texas being one of those teams. I think they're a vastly overrated football team, Texas, myself personally. And as long as the iron is hot, you have to continue to go with the hot hand, and that would be TCU in a football game like this. And I'm going to be the first to admit, TCU has, thankfully, I've still got my hair, okay?
I know. Imagine being a fan of theirs.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, my God. I'd be pulling my hair out here, whatever left there would be of it. They beat me 4 times this year, TCU, on these miracle close finishes. I just want to look for a bridge and check out the height of the bridge. But that's the way they play this year. They play with a lot of confidence in the manner in which they play football games. And until it's broke, don't fix it here. You got to take the points with an undefeated team like this. And by the way, Greg, a good friend of mine, Kenny White from Las Vegas, used to be the former oddsmaker there, texted me this morning and asked me when was the last time a 9-0 team took 7 points in a football game during the regular season. And I looked it up in the database, and it was only 2020, in the year 2020, it was Coastal Carolina took 10 from BYU.
Oh, okay.
Took 10 from BYU and won the whole game.
That's right.
Yes.
That was Grayson McCall as a freshman quarterback.
Yes,
I remember that. That was Zach Wilson, quarterback of BYU.
There you go.
That was a big game. Yep. Yeah. All right. And by the way, if either one of these teams has like a 3-touchdown lead early, game ain't over. So don't turn the TV off.
For sure.
All right. Pac-12, Oregon undefeated, 13.5-point favorite against Washington. It's a big number, but I don't care. I just still don't like the way Washington's playing. They were really outplayed by Oregon State, and they just put together an awesome drive, though, at the end, and then kicked the field goal and ran out of there with a win over Oregon State. Oregon is playing their best football of the year. They've won 8 straight. They've covered 5 straight. Washington 0-5 against the spread in their last 5, so I'm all over Oregon in this one.
Well, I'm going to be the other way in this football game here. This is a Washington team that maybe isn't playing their best football. They started out real well under Kalen DeBoer, their head coach here, but they still outgained only lost in the stats one time this year. They're 8-1 in the stats. They're winning games by almost 140 yards per game on the playing field this year. Now you're giving a team like this 13.5 points. That's a ton of points to give a football team that's still playing their heart out on the football field here. And a win like this would reestablish Washington, not so much in the Pac-12 race, they're just about out of that, but at least to a good quality bowl game here. I like Washington plus the points. Remember, Greg, Oregon has got Utah on deck next week. Utah beat Oregon twice last year, once in the regular season and once in the Pac-12 championship game. So you can best believe Oregon's looking forward to this rematch with Utah next week. That's another reason I'll be on Washington in the contest.
Yeah, the thing we have to keep in mind, too, with Oregon, though, is where are their minds? Are their minds to Utah, or are their minds about, hey, now that Clemson and Alabama lost, we have a chance to get to the playoffs. We can't be screwing this up. We can't be looking ahead to Utah, but we don't know. They're kids. We don't know how they're going to feel.
That's a great point. They've also got UCLA and Southern Cal breathing right down their necks here as well. So if they do get caught looking ahead, shame on the head coach, because it should never happen in a situation like that. But I just thought it was worth calling out.
Oh, sure. Look, we said it last week. Washington, Utah, at Oregon State, Pac-12 championship game. That's a lot. The chances for Oregon if they sweep that, they should be in the playoffs, because that's tough. So
I agree.
All right, and then the only other, overall, most of the other games in the Pac-12, there are a lot of, USC and Colorado, and Utah and Stanford, and UCLA and Arizona. So there's all heavy spreads in those games, just like the Oregon game. But that, at least, Washington is definitely a high caliber underdog. All right, now let's go to the group of 5, and we start with the AAC. We already talked about it. By the way, Memphis plays Tulsa tonight, but tomorrow night, East Carolina, Cincinnati. They've won 3 straight, the Pirates have. They've won the last 2 games outright as dogs, just like they are here. They've been dominated by Cincinnati the last 4 years. Cincinnati has dropped 4 straight covers this season. And they're also 0-6 against the spread as a conference favorite of 9 or less when they take on winning teams off an ATS win. And, of course, I was able to pick that up at Playbook Magazine.
There you go.
But I just really like what's going on with East Carolina. We both liked them in the beginning of the season as a sleeper. They struggled a little bit early on, but they're playing their best football. Their confidence is sky high, and I think this is the perfect time for them to finally get over the Cincinnati hump.
I agree. They're one of the best college dogs in football, especially on the road, which is where they'll be in this particular game. And Cincinnati is showing signs that that team that made the college football playoff last year, they're nowhere close to that football team this year. I think they're going to have their hands full with the Pirates here as well. I like East Carolina in the possible upset here with you.
Also, Tulane and Central Florida, another huge game. 2 of the top teams. Tulane's a 1.5-point favorite. Just like I said with East Carolina, though, Tulane, they play even better because they've had a great season. I mean, let's remember they beat Kansas State, a Big 12 team on the road. So this is not a fluke of what's going on with Tulane. They've covered and won 5 straight games, plus also from the Playbook magazine, 19-2 against the spread as a favorite of less than 11 points when they're coming off a double-digit spread win, and they're 2-0 in that spot this year, and it's occurred in the last 2 games. So I think they're going to make it 3 straight. I think this is the best team in the conference right now. They're at home, and I think they're going to get it done.
I agree with you. And what really impressed me was the fact that they made the college football playoff rankings 2 weeks ago in the initial ranking, and they didn't lay an egg. Okay, they come out and they won a football game convincingly to prove that they belonged there. Go look at this football team. In their last 14 conference home games, they are 11-3 to the spread. Willie Fritz knows how to take care of business at home, and I believe he'll do it here as well.
And this is a huge game also for Tulane's chances. Let's just say, all right, yeah, because Tulane, and the big thing is like you said, with whoever is the best group of 5 team gets to the big bowl and all that. But Tulane is hosting SMU next week, and then they're at Cincinnati. So they have tough games left. Central Florida's last 2 games, Navy and South Florida. So this is a huge, much bigger game. Even though Tulane's a game ahead of Central Florida, a much bigger game for Tulane to make sure that they can give themselves a little bit of a cushion and ensure that they end up in the AAC championship game.
One quick little note here from the Midweek Alert newsletter, our statistical newsletter here. If you look inside the stats, you'll see this Tulane football team has held 3 opponents to season-low yardage marks this year. They're playing some really good defense. So it's not all about the offense there. They're a very well-balanced football team.
Navy's in the AAC. They're taking on Notre Dame. It's a 15-point spread. I wanted to bring this game up because, check this out. Notre Dame, 0-4 against the spread versus losing teams. 5-0 against the spread versus teams with a 500 or better record. That is just crazy. So that says you're supposed to take Navy, but keep in mind Notre Dame has covered all 4 games away from home this year. So I'm staying away from this game.
Well, I would only take the points with Navy here. First of all, while they've been battered in this series, they've lost 37 of the last 41 games in the scoreboard. They've cashed 24 times in those games.
Oh.
And you've also got, I think, a huge letdown situation here for Notre Dame off that big Clemson win here to go out and be focused here. And remember, the game's in Baltimore, okay?
Yeah.
Where there's going to be a lot of Midi people there. You know, that's right near where the Annapolis is, real close to them. So I think this is a nice spot for Navy to go in there and walk away with the money at least in the football game.
Mountain West, Fresno at UNLV on Friday. Big game for UNLV because they have 3 games left to win 2 to go bowling. And they have not been bowling since 2013. It would be their 3rd bowl since 94 and their 5th bowl ever. So, but even if they lose, they're at Hawaii and host Nevada. So I think UNLV still has a chance to go bowling if they lose this game, but unfortunately, they're going one way and Fresno's going the other. They're playing their best football now with Jake Haener back under controls. And they're tied with San Jose State in the West, and San Jose State's at San Diego State as a 2.5-point favorite. So this, if San Jose State loses this game, it's pretty much all over for Fresno State to clinch the West because they've beaten both San Jose State and San Diego State.
Well, in the Fresno game, like you mentioned, this big momentum for Fresno. They got this nice 4-game win streak going on here. And they've also got their defensive captain coming back for this game, which is a huge plus for this football team coming in. They'll be going in with a lot of confidence. And while UNLV has played a lot better brand of football this year, this is simply a step up in class I don't think they can handle. The San Diego State-San Jose State football game, I think it's a nice edge to San Diego State here. You got San Jose's already clinched a bowl berth. And San Diego State is grasping and clawing for everything they can do just to get there. So for that reason alone, I would play the points with the Aztecs in that game.
Boise, meanwhile, at Nevada, a heavy favorite, and Wyoming at Colorado State. This is more trickier for Wyoming because they have to stay a game behind Boise because next week they host Boise for the opportunity to take the lead in the Mountain Division. In the Sun Belt, you got Georgia Southern and Lafayette today, and these are 2 teams, separate divisions in the Sun Belt. Home finale for the Cajuns. in that one. And then Saturday, you got James Madison trying to snap a 3-game losing streak. Check out Old Dominion. Here's a trend from the Playbook magazine. They're just 4-13 straight up, 3-14 against the spread when they come off a straight up loss by 13 points or less. So that's a bad sign for Old Dominion in the game against James Madison. Georgia State is a 13.5 point favorite against ULM. We just talked about Georgia State still has a shot to possibly steal the Sun Belt East if Coastal can't win without Grayson McCall. Georgia State started off the season. They were, I think, 1-4, or no, they were 0-4. They've won 4 out of the last 5 straight up and against the spread. This is their home finale, which would give them 5 wins. They road games for James Madison and Marshall. They would need to win one of those 2. And then they would be in their 5th bowl in 6 years under Sean Elliott, who's done a tremendous job. And maybe Sean Elliott deserves an opportunity to coach in the Power 5.
Maybe he does. He's doing a real nice job with the football program here. Georgia State football team, last 8 times they've been a double-digit favorite coming off of when they won the money all 8 football games. They will not fall prey to the Warhawks of ULM in this football game. They're playing too good a football right now, and they're going to be in the mix in the Sun Belt Conference. There's a lot of good games on tap in the Sun Belt this week. You mentioned Old Dominion here, but in that bad stat roll that they're in, they're also catching James Madison off of a surly loss as well. So I wouldn't want to be wearing a Monarch uniform this weekend.
App State Marshall, that's a big game. You have App State, even though, again, the chances are kind of low that they're going to be able to steal the East now because they did lose to Coastal Carolina. Interesting, they're 0-2 straight up and against the spread as a road favorite this year. Marshall, 2-0 straight up and against the spread as a dog this year. App State's a 1-point favorite. Marshall also same record as App State. A lot of people thought App State and Marshall, this would be the game to decide the East when the season began. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case, though. And Troy is at home against Army. So not a conference game, of course, but Troy, a great season for year 1 head coach John Sumrall, the former defensive coordinator from Kentucky. They're 7-2 straight up, 7-1 against the spread. Army had the loss to Air Force last week. I like Troy in this spot. I mean, this is a step up in competition in my mind for Army, and I just think this is a good spot for Troy. Only given 9 in the spot, so I'm going with Troy. It might be my favorite pick overall on this weekend in the Sun Belt.
I wouldn't disagree about Troy. There's a real sneaky good football team, I think, in the making there this year. The big game here is Marshall App State, obviously, matched with 2 real contending football teams. And I'm going to stay at home with Marshall in this football contest here. App State, while they're a name program now, they really haven't gotten the job done this football season, especially against the spread. And if you look at what Marshall does so well, the last 3 games in a row they've played, they've held those opponents to season-low yards 3 games in a row. This defense is hitting on all cylinders right now for Marshall. And go look at them at home, where they're really, really strong in football games here. 66-16 against winning teams in this particular role here. I think they get the win over App State.
All right. And then what I want to do is kind of segue a couple of games from the Conference USA to the upset picks that I have this week, because I have a bunch of them, double digits, only 1 single digit, and that happens to be North Texas against Alabama Birmingham. I feasted against Alabama Birmingham this year. I used to feast for Alabama Birmingham, but Bill Clark is no longer there, so I've been because the line makers, they just haven't gone away from them as much as I thought that they would. Bill Clark is a huge reason, the reason, really, that UAB was winning as much as they were. Without him, they're just a different team. A tough loss coming off that loss last week to UTSA in overtime. North Texas is 4-1 straight up, 6-0 against the spread in their last 6. And UAB 0-3 straight up last 3, 0-4 against the spread last 4. So I'm all over North Texas in this one. Seth Luttrell's got them humming again, and this is a great opportunity for them to try to put themselves in that position for a rematch with Texas San Antonio in a Conference USA championship game. So I'm not only taking the points, which are 6, but I'm taking the money line, which is close to 2-1.
I would agree with you. I think this is nice making. I like this North Texas team, and I think you, as you say, UAB is vastly overrated. Name and reputation. I like your play in that game.
All right, now we go to some of the. I have 5 double-digit underdog plays, so you have them. We're gonna.
I have them, and before you get there, let me say this, okay? When I was young, my mother used to try to make us eat liver, which my sister and I detested.
That's like a Happy Days skit.
Well,
Remember Fonzie used to hate liver.
oh, so she would dress it up every which way she could and call it everything but liver, but we knew it was liver. So it doesn't matter how you disguise these teams. I think your 5 teams all have the look of liver to me, but go ahead.
Well, that's why they're double-digit underdogs, though.
I understand.
I know. All right. So we're going to start with Rice in the Conference USA against Western Kentucky. The theory is you have a Western Kentucky team that became bowl eligible last week. Next week, they're at Auburn. And even Auburn's struggling. It's an SEC team. So I think this is a sandwich game in a way. And let's keep in mind, Western Kentucky did lose a couple of weeks ago to North Texas. Good team. But they did lose. Rice, they've had a very good season, and their schedule is tough. They have at Western Kentucky versus Texas San Antonio and at North Texas. So these are the 3 best teams in the conference, and they have to win one of them to go bowl eligible for the first time since 2014. And by the way, if you want to think of a head coach, if he can get Rice to bowl eligibility, maybe Mike Bloomgren could be the next head coach at Stanford, because that's where he came from, if Stanford looks for a new head coach. But hey, maybe they might want to look that way if he can get Rice into a bowl with these 3 games remaining on their schedule. So look, I think it's been a very nice season for Rice, and I'm just going to go ahead and roll the dice that maybe Western Kentucky is not as focused as they should be.
Well, you'd have to really dice it up with some really good tomatoes and onions and everything for me to swallow that, because it's still liver to me.
Moving on back to the Sun Belt, and I talked about this Texas State team before, and they almost came through for me a couple of weeks ago in a very close game with Troy, and they had the big upset against App State that should open eyes. I mean, taking a look at this, and we also talked about the possibility of having a coach on the hot seat, and this was one of them, Spividal. And even though the record isn't, I think, indicative of the season that they're having, if you look at it, they need to run the table to go bowl eligibility, so that's not going to be easy. But the next 2 games are winnable. They're both at home. So this is it. If they can find a way to beat South Alabama, they have a chance to go bowl eligibility. Now, in their last 4 games, they lost by 1 to Louisiana Monroe, 3 at Troy, 6 versus Southern Miss, and they beat App State. So they're playing their best football of the year, and I just think that they're underrated, and I think that if I'm looking for, you're always looking for those types of underdogs, and I think they fit the bill.
Well, they probably do, fitting the bill that way. And this might be the guy I would look at out of your list as a possibility here. I think I didn't look the card over for other double-digit upset possibilities, but I kind of wanted to hear your reasoning behind these, because there's a lot of intrigue behind these. That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah, the 2 in the AAC. Now, Temple coming off the big, the high-scoring game for them, which is pretty good. So their confidence level's nice. And Stan Drayton is really doing a good job. I mean, they've covered 3 straight games for a reason. They're 1-2 straight up in their last 3. They lost in overtime to Navy in that stretch. So they're playing really good football. They're trying to build something there. Houston's 2-5 against the spread in their last 7. They're coming off that just crazy video game against SMU last week. So, I think that there might be a big letdown situation here for Houston. Realistically, they're not, because of that loss, they're not going to play in the AAC championship game. So, yeah, this is one of those things where can Temple get Drayton that signature win in year 1? Maybe not. Probably not. Don't forget, the Rutgers game was close, so they've played better than people have thought. I think that, and I remember even just a few weeks ago in the Memphis game, they were down, I believe, 1 score going into the fourth quarter on the road, and they wound up losing by like 21. And that game, and Memphis is just as tough as Houston is on their home stadium. So I figured, why not? Maybe this is one of those big kind of odds plays that I can get lucky on.
Well, what you've got in Houston here is a football team that's asking itself, how could you gain 710 yards in a game and not win it? They got to probably second guess themselves. But I know what your real play in here is. You're trying to get Dana Holgorsen fired. Temple up.
Hey, maybe that would be 2 coaches in a row that Temple gets fired.
Yes, it would. Maybe it would be. Who knows?
And speaking of the team that that fired their coach, South Florida, getting 18 from SMU, and this is easy. The reasoning here, and I'm just going to look at the history of head coaches that have been fired this season. Okay, there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. Okay, 8 coaches have been fired. 5 of the coaches, those teams, in 5 of the 7 previous situations, all covered the next game. 4 of them won. So let's go through it. Auburn just lost last week in overtime as a 13-point road dog. Charlotte beat Rice by 33 points as a 14-point road dog.
Wow.
Colorado beat California, their first win of the season, as 15-point dogs. Georgia Tech beat Pittsburgh as 21-point road dogs. And Wisconsin beat Northwestern by 35 as a 10-point favorite. So the only ones that didn't work were Arizona State and Nebraska. So you had 4 wins. One of those teams lost, and you had 4 dog wins of 13, 14, 15, and 21 points. So
pretty impressive.
When the coach gets fired, you just don't know how the team is going to respond.
Well, it seems like the coaches that get fired on bad football teams, the teams are really rather pumped up about it because they flat out weren't playing for that coach, obviously. And now there's new air in the room, in the locker room. Good points. You made great examples for situations like that. Who knows what the situation was at USF when he got fired. And SMU now feeling rather good about that massive shootout win last week over Houston. They could end up being in a real bad, flat letdown spot. And if it was bad enough and they let down bad enough, you might cash this ticket.
Either that or SMU and Houston will beat South Florida and Temple by a combined 100 points.
Either or, right.
Yeah,
Anywhere in between, right.
And then the final one is Vanderbilt against Kentucky. And Vandy is looking for their signature win under Clark Lee. Kentucky just became bowl eligible last week. So this game doesn't mean anything. And who's next week? Georgia. They get Georgia at home. So bowl eligible 1 week, Georgia the next. They're not playing for anything. They're not winning in the conference, division. This is a game that means nothing to them. Vanderbilt's looking for that big signature win, and they've been competitive. I mean, they haven't been able to get close enough to win any of these games yet. But Kentucky's one of these teams offensively that just doesn't scare you. I mean, I could see Kentucky's offense kind of going out there and being sluggish, and Vandy maybe hangs with them. Don't forget, Vandy almost beat Missouri a couple of weeks ago at Missouri. So why not?
On second thought, I'm going to pull back my Texas State as being the game I think you might have the best chance on and cast it to Vanderbilt instead.
Okay.
I like the look ahead for Kentucky to Georgia in a spot like this. Vanderbilt has not been that marshmallow that everybody expects them to be. They're playing some pretty competitive football this football season. That's all about the head coach here. And Kentucky's been known to not show up in football games. It's all about Will Levis, this quarterback, who's up and down and up and down. You could very easily play down to Vanderbilt's level here. I'll cast my vote for Vanderbilt as being your straight-up winner on this ticket.
All right. And then we wrap up with the NFL. So what we're going to do before we wrap up with the NFL, and that's going to be coming up in just a second, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break, a fantasy break, with Jared Smola from DraftSharks.com. We talk, by the way, on these fantasy breaks, it's not all fantasy football. It's a lot of injury news. So a lot of injury talk. You want to know what's going on injury-wise with key players in the NFL, especially on offense, then stay tuned for this fantasy break. And don't forget, bottom of the screen, we have the markers. If you're not interested, you can just fast forward to anywhere you want to fast forward to, including when we pick things up again and wrap up our show with the NFL. So let's go ahead and talk some fantasy football. We'll be back in, as long as you want to be back. All right, so let's talk fantasy football with Jared Smola of Draft Sharks, draftsharks.com. You can also find out everything you want to know about Draft Sharks at ourlads.com. Just check out the fantasy section. And the best way to keep up to date at what's going on as far as key injuries along the NFL on a weekly basis. Jared, good to talk to you again.
Good to be back, Greg. Week 10.
Another week.
Crazy.
We get closer to Hawaii. So, yeah. As far as the NFL is concerned, Week 10, yes, we're definitely now for sure at the midway point of the NFL season. And a long way to go still. So, as a Jet fan, it's a long time coming. But as far as the NFL in general, the trade deadline is over. Still a lot of key injuries that we're going to go over. So, a couple of things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, as we always do, we'll update all the key injuries. And then what we want to do is definitely fantasy is take a look at our rosters from the beginning of the season to this point in the season and see how things have changed, because we've had our share of injuries as well on our teams, and I thought that was kind of I think that's a kind of interesting thing to take a look at. But before we do that, let's take a look at some key injuries around the NFL. And what would you say? Look. Josh Allen, it's going to be hard to tell what's going to go on there. What's your gut tell you?
My gut tells me he's not going to play on Sunday.
That's my gut feeling. And he's my quarterback, my fantasy quarterback.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to miss a lot of time. Might be a game or two. But so what I've heard from the doctors that I follow and speak to is it's an injury that can be made worse if he plays through it and takes a hit, or if the arm elbow bends the wrong way, and also that it is a functionality problem where his grip strength might be weakened, his arm strength might be weakened. So it's not just a pain. If it was just a pain tolerance thing, I think he'd play through it. But it's more.
There's a risk, and since there's a risk, why risk it? There's no reason. You're still in the driver's seat to win the division. You're more than likely going to win the division. So even if you lose this game, there's just no reason at all to put yourself in that kind of risk factor. And want to remind everybody too, you could check out Draft Sharks, because you guys have the injury predictor, which is awesome. Not just because it's basically trying to predict injuries, but it gives you a full scale of all the injuries that each player has had over his career, including Josh Allen.
That's the best. Right. And he's had this same exact injury his rookie season. He missed 4 games with it then. So I guess, that's possible. A 4-game absence is probably about the worst case scenario.
Let's now, fantasy-wise, since I had Josh Allen, now I went into this week, and my backup quarterback all year has been Aaron Rodgers. He was my number 2 in case something happens, but didn't think that it would be this bad. So there was nobody available. I mean, for whatever strange reason, our league this season, just everybody's picking up. Like, if you have a pulse as a quarterback, we've picked them up. So
no Justin Fields.
No, there's nobody good. No one. So I decided to pick up Case Keenum. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to play him over Aaron Rodgers. I can't trust Aaron Rodgers right now. I can't. And one of the things that Marc Lawrence and I always talk about, Mark, of course, been a handicapper for many years, is anytime a backup quarterback plays that first game, especially if the team is halfway decent, you get a bump. Mm-hmm. A lot of times those players playing, everybody rallies around the backup for that first game. It's not always 100%, but definitely over 50%. So I figured, okay, if he plays, they rally around him. I'd rather have Case Keenum than Aaron. I can't trust Aaron Rodgers. I just can't. I mean, I just don't know what's going on there. I mean, we know what's going on there, but we kind of don't, because it's really gotten, when you throw 3 interceptions against the Detroit Lions, you really don't know what's going on. It's just incredibly bad.
Yeah, and tough spot for Rodgers to speak against Dallas. Dallas, the fourth best defense against quarterbacks, fantasy points wise. So yeah, we have Case Keenum ranked ahead of Aaron Rodgers right now. As crazy as that sounds, Keenum's capable. He's a quality backup. He can come in, run the offense, get the ball to Steph Diggs, get the ball to Gate. There's enough weapons there. He'll be okay.
Yeah.
He's not going to win your week for you, but I think he'll be okay.
That's why because it's a big blow for me or anyone else that relies on Josh Allen. Because with Jamar Chase out of my lineup, now I'm going to have Josh Allen out of my lineup. I mean, it's Kenneth Walker and then a whole bunch of who knows kind of deals. So it's probably not going to be a good week for me. All right. Also, quarterback situation. What is the other? What was the other one? There's another big one.
Matthew Stafford.
Yes,
is in
Matthew Stafford.
Protocol.
So what's up with there?
So he went in concussion protocol on Tuesday. So he's up against it to get cleared in time for Sunday. John Walford is their backup quarterback, so that'd obviously be a big downgrade.
Wake Forest.
And then on the other side of that game, Wake Forest guy. Yep, he started. I think it was in 2020.
Yeah, he did
against the Cardinals in the season finale. He won that game. He ran for like 50.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
he can move a little bit. But on the other side of that game, Kyler Murray did not practice on Wednesday with a hamstring. So he's looking iffy as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Who's the backup there?
Colt McCoy.
Colt McCoy. Well, these aren't guys you're going to be picking up on your fantasy. Colt McCoy, though, with that roster of receivers, I mean, if I had same thing with what's going on with me. If I have Murray on my team and I don't have a quality backup, sure, I'd pick up Colt McCoy just in case.
Yeah, I mean, McCoy started 3 games last year, completed 75% of his passes, averaged 7.5 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's like Keenum. He's a capable backup quarterback. He can at least keep the offense on.
All right. What other key injuries are going on that we need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor returned to practice on Wednesday. It looks like he's trending towards returning for Sunday's game against the Raiders. Tough to get excited about him with what's going on in Indianapolis, but I mean, it's Jonathan Taylor. He's probably going to get his 15 to 20 touches. He's probably starting for you if he comes back this week.
Would you open up trade possibilities?
Trade for him or trade him away?
Trade him away.
I'd trade him away. If someone thinks they're going to get top 5 running back Jonathan Taylor, I'd be selling him to that owner.
Anyone else? How about the Chargers? They're still Keenan Allen. I mean, when is Keenan Allen coming back?
I don't think he's coming back this week. He didn't practice on Wednesday. He said he's not going to come back now until he's 100%, which is what he should have done in the first place. Hamstrings are tricky, so I would not bank on Keenan Allen playing. Mike Williams is not going to play, so Josh Palmer. I think we talked about him.
I picked him up last week, and I started him.
100 yards. There you go.
Yep.
Tougher matchup on Sunday night. So I don't like him as much as I did last week, but I think he's
got to play him.
He's going to get targets.
Yeah. What about Carolina? Because that game's tonight. I'm not sure by time this gets posted if the game will be on already. But Chuba Hubbard, I mean, I can't start him. Once I heard that he's questionable, I wanted to start him because I have issues in that situation, but I just can't do it.
Yeah, he put in full practices on Tuesday and Wednesday, so I think he's going to play. I think he's probably going to be close to 100%. I think Dante Foreman's going to remain the lead back, though.
Sure.
I think he played well enough over the past couple of weeks to keep that role. So, yeah, I'm with you. I would try to keep Hubbard on your bench this week.
Yeah, the debate for me, though, is the fact that now I don't know. What's the status with Green Bay, with Jones?
Yeah, it looks like he's going to play.
It does look like he's going to play.
Yeah, he said earlier in the week that he's on track to play. So, yeah, I think you can pencil him into your lineup for now.
All right. Well, then in that case, see it's still a tough decision for me because of the fact that they're playing well, no, it's not a tough decision anymore because they're playing the Cowboys. So I'm probably better off than putting Chuba Hubbard into the lineup than over because I was going to go with AJ Dillon, but if Jones is playing, then I have to go with Hubbard, don't I? I mean, Dillon hasn't done anything. The whole Packer offense hasn't done anything. It's terrible.
I don't know. Yeah, you're also talking about the Panthers. I don't think they're going to do much tonight either.
Well, it's Atlanta's defense, though.
Yeah, that's true. We have Dillon ranked 2 spots higher, so it's close. I think you're looking at similar volume. You're probably going to get 10, 12 touches out of these guys.
I know.
I don't know. I still think Dillon's the better player.
Well, we know he's the
not
better
even that
player.
far,
There ain't no question about that. But it's just, boy, he's done
it's
nothing.
close. It's close for sure.
Sort of. That's why I say that Clyde Edwards-Helaire actually makes. He's actually was having a good season compared to AJ Dillon. That's how bad the season. Yeah, now he's on a terrible 3-week run.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's like the end of the game last week. I think for like the last 5 minutes of the game in overtime was all Jerick McKinnon.
That's the thing with Edwards-Helaire. For him to deliver, you wanted him getting that pass catching work. They're giving it almost all to AJ Dillon right now, or to Jerick McKinnon.
I don't understand it. I don't.
Yeah. So I mean, Edwards-Helaire is. I'm not going to say he's cuttable, but he shouldn't be in fantasy lineups right now.
Yeah, well, we in our league we have we add into once the season's over in fantasy football, we continue into the postseason. So if you have any postseason players, so that's why I wouldn't cut them with the Chiefs.
Sure.
Which makes it fun for a little side deal. Anybody else that we need to keep an eye on injury wise? Any important ones?
I have Zeke Elliott down here. It looks like he's going to be back. He made a comment yesterday that was like, he's not quite sure. He's got to see how he feels over the rest of the week. But so we'll see on Zeke Elliott. That obviously impacts Tony Pollard. Darren Waller was just placed on IR this afternoon, actually. So he's out the next 4 games. He's cuttable if you need the roster spot. He's out till at least week 14.
Okay. And yeah, I don't know what's going on there with the Raiders. I don't understand why. And I know Hunter Renfrow had some issues earlier this year with the concussion and stuff, but he's been back for almost a month, and they're not getting him the ball. I don't understand what they're doing there with that offense.
Yeah, Carr just hasn't really been good in that Josh McDaniels offense. I mean, maybe it gets better over the second half of the season.
They got to move on.
Settles
they got to move on. Even if Josh McDaniels was, for whatever reason, which I just think is lunacy, if Josh McDaniels doesn't come back, then you got to move on from Derek Carr. You have to. If you want to keep him as a placeholder, fine, but you better draft a quarterback next year if you're the Raiders.
Yeah, he's
time to move on.
Carr's making a bunch of money though. It makes it tough for him.
What's
to
his
get
dead
traded,
cap?
I think. I can pull it up.
Yeah, because even if you keep him through 2023 as the veteran placeholder, that's fine. But you got to have an answer next season.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah. So his dead cap this offseason is only $5.6 million. So I guess
this season
he's cuttable. If they wanted to cut him this
offseason, okay,
it'd be $5.6 million.
Yeah, so. they might want to do that. Anyone else before we move on?
No, that'll do it for the big ones.
All right, now I want to let's take a look at your roster because we did this in the beginning of the season, and let's see. So you had Jalen Hurts, a quarterback. So you had Hurts, and I had Allen. So we did really well there. We felt we were going to do really well there.
Yep.
So your running back situation now, Fournette and Patterson. Are those your 2 starters?
Yep. That's what I'm down to now, Greg.
Who got hurt?
I had Breece Hall on this team.
Oh, you had this is the Breece Hall team.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
At
least you got Patterson back.
Patterson looks good last week. They're still using Algier and Caleb Huntley to some extent, but they run it.
Yeah.
That's fine. Patterson's going to get 15 or so touches per game. He looked great. So I feel okay with him. I almost feel better about Patterson than Fournette at this point. I mean, Fournette looks horrible. That running game looks horrible. Fournette is at least getting, the work in the passing game, kind of keeping his value afloat. But not super excited about these running backs. Kind of banking on Hurts and these wide receivers carrying me.
Yeah. So and then, Latavius Murray. I mean, he's the best of your reserves.
Well, Jeff Wilson now actually. I've had him stashed.
That's true. Now that he's with the Dolphins, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a 50-50 split last week right out of the gate. Wilson and Mostert split work down the middle. So I think, Wilson at this point is startable as a running back 3 or flex play at least.
And having Cooper Kupp is huge. Other than that, I mean, Jerry Jeudy's been a disappointment for you, right?
Yeah, so far. He got going a little bit before the bye week. And then, hopefully coming out of the bye, maybe that Denver offense figured something out. I'm excited about George Pickens the rest of the way. To me, he's looked like Pittsburgh's best receiver this season, and then obviously Chase Claypool traded to Chicago. Claypool leaving behind like six targets per game, freed up with Claypool out of the way. So Pickens picks up a few of those. Maybe Kenny Pickett takes a step forward coming out of the bye week. So I think Pickens could be a difference maker over the second half.
And then you have Rondale Moore. I have Rondale Moore as well on my team. But he gets a lot of targets. It's just he doesn't score a whole lot of touchdowns.
Well, his targets are all like 2.
That too.
So I mean, in PPR leagues, if you're getting that full point per catch, he's a pretty solid starter. But yeah, you're right. There's not a ton of upside because he doesn't make a whole lot of big plays, and he's not a big touchdown guy.
And then Elijah Moore's been a big disappointment. It's just incredible.
He was dropped in this league, so I picked him up
just in case.
See what happens. Yeah, we'll see. They have their bye.
They do. Yep.
Robert Saleh said they're moving more to the slot now. I don't know if you saw that interview he did with Josina Anderson.
I hope so. With the bye week,
yeah,
that's where he should be anyway.
For sure. They moved Garrett Wilson to the outside like 3 weeks ago, and he's been better on the outside. Corey Davis will come back after the bye week. He'll be the other outside receiver. Then hopefully Moore can be a full time slot guy. I still don't think he's going to become a fantasy starter. Just there's not enough to go around in that.
Yeah, they'd have to pass the ball more.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure this is the season to do that. If you have him on a dynasty team, that's completely different.
Oh yeah. I'd be buying him in Dynasty. I still believe in the player.
Absolutely. Because you know what? I got to be honest with you. The fact that, as a Jet fan, the fact that he doesn't get the touches, targets at all, leads me to believe that there's got to be like a little bit of, all right, you're going to have to learn your lesson. Mm-hmm. And let's see how you play without getting any. You thought the targets were low before. Let's see how you play now without any targets. That's what I think, because I can't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. Jeff Smith gets passes thrown his way. He doesn't even. I don't think he's had one target since he had the big brush off. Yeah.
Robert, you should watch the interview with Josina Anderson.
When was it?
There's like it was earlier this week. Okay. If you go to, if you just search Josina Anderson, Robert Slot interview, I'm sure you'll find it. He talked for 3-4 minutes about Elijah Moore. Had only good things to say about him. Like,
that's all he ever does.
They're not Yeah, I mean they're not upset with the trade request. They think he just wants to contribute more. They like his work ethic, all that stuff. So I don't know. I think they still view him as part of their future.
Absolutely, yeah, I believe that as well. And now, like you said, the bye. This is the perfect week to move him back in the slot. Let's see what happens, because you're going to need him against the Patriots, because the Patriots are going to stop the run. So you're going to have to throw the football a little bit with success. And then taking a look at my roster from the beginning of the season to now, and again, the two big injuries that have hurt me, which Marquise Brown, when is he coming back? It's got to be soon.
A few weeks. I think he's eligible to come back maybe next week, but I think it might be a few more weeks.
Like week 11, week 12?
Yeah. Yep.
And then Jamar Chase was not put on IR, so we have no idea when he's coming back. We haven't heard anything.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he was not put on IR makes me think the Bengals might think he has a chance to return, next week coming out of the bye. So we'll see.
Yeah. So those are the ones that have really hurt me. And then
What's your record?
6-3. What are you?
Nice. 7-2.
There you go. Yep. So, yeah, I'm like third in points. What are you?
I believe I'm first in points.
Cool.
Yeah.
You must be high then in points against, because I'm pretty high in points against.
I'm like, it looks like I'm near the bottom in points against.
Really?
So I've gotten lucky there. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah.
Okay.
This team could have. So I think I explained to you this league. It's a 12-team league, but then after week 13, all the winners of the leagues go into like a final playoff pool where it's about 1,000 teams in that thing. And then it's a total points race at that point. So that's the ultimate prize you're shooting for. I think this team had a shot to make some noise in there if Breece Hall hadn't gone down. I don't think I have enough firepower to really compete for the overall title. But if I can just win my league, make some money, I'll be happy.
Yeah, that's the injury situation is always the bummer. No question about it.
Yep.
I was just glad that I was able to draft Kenneth Walker after I drafted Penny, because I had Penny first, awesome. and I don't think I took much long. I think it might have been just the next pick or 2 picks later when I was able to grab Walker, and that saved me.
Yeah. It's so crazy. If you drafted like any Seattle Seahawk, you're happy. Whereas like, if you had asked someone in August, they'd be like, I don't want any part of that offense.
Yeah, right.
It's been the biggest surprise of the season, how good that offense has been.
Absolutely. And then I've had disappointments with AJ Dillon not doing anything, with DJ Moore not doing anything, and with Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Darrell Henderson. I mean, I didn't get nothing out of any of those guys. And yet, and then I have the injuries. But when you have Josh Allen, just like you have with Hurts, and then you have Kupp, and then I had Chase for a little while, and then I have Walker, it's like you could have 75% of your players are like, I'm not really excited about them. But if you have those superstar 2 or 3 of them, that could like lead your team for a while.
That's what fantasy football always comes down to. It's, do you have the 2, 3, or 4 like true difference makers? It's been a tough season. Scoring in the NFL is down in general. Fantasy production is down in general. So yeah, it's if you have 2 or 3 of those elite guys, like that's kind of all you need this season.
Jared, appreciate it. Matt will be back next week, and we'll talk to Matt, get him back here on the show, and then before you know it, we'll be in the stretch drive for the postseason. So can't wait for that. When does you have? Because most fantasy league postseasons begin week 14?
It could be week 15 now, right? If you do 3 weeks of playoff.
Yeah, well, 17. We don't do 17. Most teams don't do that bad final week of the season,
there's 18
do they?
Weeks now.
Well, that's right, 18
now in the season. So
that's right. So 15, 16, 17.
Yep.
Or 16, 17 if you only have 4 like we do. Yeah.
By the way, on DraftSharks, we have an awesome tool. It's a strength of schedule tool.
Okay.
Where it's a grid. So for every team, you can see like, their upcoming schedule and how the matchups are for the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wild side end. So I like to use that and try to get an idea of, which teams have the best playoff schedules and maybe start to acquire some guys who have good matchups in those final few weeks of the season.
That's as far as free agents or
it could be free agents or guys to trade
for. Okay.
If trading's still open in your league.
And where is that situated at DraftSharks?
It's our strength of schedule.
So it just says it, strength of schedule.
Yep, on the site, go to the Intel drop down to the top, and then you'll see strength of schedule. And it's a pretty easy to understand grid.
Awesome. Sounds good. Jared, appreciate it. We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Good luck this week.
You got it. You too. Back to the show. All right. So there you go. Fantasy football talk with Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com. You can check out the NFL injury news anytime, either directly at DraftSharks.com or even just our lads. Our lads, anytime you visit the Our Lads site, you can check the fantasy site. It goes right there on the front page. We have the information that tells you everything you want to know about injuries in the NFL, care of DraftSharks. All right, let's talk NFL to wrap things up here. And the one thing I wanted to kind of start off with. Well, actually, the big story that everybody's talking about, of course, the Colts. So I'm going to get too much into it because it's been talked about, and I think really what everybody's now intrigued about is what's going to happen. Like, what is this team going to look like by taking some guy out of the radio booth, and it's just the whole situation just to me smells like they've given up. Yes, right. It doesn't smell good to me.
Right. I agree with
what are your thoughts?
100%. I have no idea what Robert Irsay is doing here right now. We knew something was coming when he sent Matt Ryan to the bench. Okay.
Yes.
And used the excuse of a shoulder, which was pure BS. He had this plan in place, and he's looking to execute it. I think it's the wrong plan here. I would think most of the National Football League fans across the country would agree with that. I think he's playing to have Bryce Young as his quarterback in this next year. Okay,
they're gonna have to make some trades, but yeah, that could happen.
And also bringing in an offensive coordinator from an offensive coordinator at the highest level you ever coached was Division III and was never ever an offensive coordinator. Has never called a play in life. Yep. Are you kidding me? This is the National Football League. I'm surprised Roger Goodell honestly doesn't step in and ask what's going on there. I really am.
It is. It's that's why I'm really surprised, and I understand what's going on with Las Vegas and Josh McDaniels. And I'm going to say this though: if you go to hire anybody, okay, especially somebody that has a track record of Josh McDaniels as an assistant, and you hire that guy, you can't be thinking about firing him in one season. That is the stupidest. If that's the case, who would take that job with Las Vegas? Who would be the next guy to take that job if you're going to give an assistant coach with that much experience of winning and all that, and you give him a job and you get rid of him? So I know there's talk about, well, is Josh McDaniels going to get fired? Now, maybe that's just nonsense, and I'm overreacting to it, but I'm just saying it just in case he's actually thinking of it. Because if he's really thinking of firing Josh McDaniels, we haven't even gotten through the first season yet. He's never going to hire anybody. Nobody's ever going to take that job.
Well, let me say this. If they come out of this football game looking as bad as that perhaps it appears they're going to do.
Yeah, you might be right about that. Yes.
Okay.
I would agree with that. Yes.
You can mark this down. Okay.
Don't lose to this team. Yes.
You're going to see spreads against Indianapolis that are outrageously high because it'll only be too obvious as this football team is not caring and has thrown in the towel. After this, they're going to play Philadelphia. Then they're going to host Pittsburgh. And instead of being what they should be in that game, like an 8 or 10-point favorite, that game is going to be pick 'em, okay? Because of how poorly and what the reason the Colts, the way they're playing their football games. Then they're going to go to Dallas. You're going to see a 20-plus point spread in that football game. Home to Minnesota, a double-digit underdog. Home to the Chargers, a double-digit underdog. At the Giants, a 14-point underdog. And to close the season out against Houston, and they'll be a home dog to them because they're going to see what's going on with Indianapolis here. Just mark my words. If this happens, be prepared because this is likely what we're going to see.
Yeah, but we'll find out. Again, it starts with Las Vegas, and we'll look. The only reason I'm taking Las Vegas has nothing to do with the way Las Vegas is playing. That's for sure. I just think I'm only having to give 5 points up to a team that right now looks completely dysfunctional, and I cannot anticipate that these players are feeling really good. Because just imagine what the players are thinking right now. They must be thinking that if we believe that they're tanking, they have to believe it, and that's the worst feeling for players to think. You think they want to rally? You think in a sport like football, as physical it is, they want to go throwing their bodies around for an owner that wants to tank the season? I don't see it. This
is the biggest train wreck of a game in the National Football League this season here. Because if the Raiders don't win this football game, Josh McDaniels will be the first-year head coach to be fired this season here. He won't even last the end of the season if he doesn't beat this Colts.
I couldn't even back him if that happened.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So opposite ends of bizarre situations that could happen are going to occur in this football game, and I'll be anxious to see exactly what happens depending upon who wins this football game. Good luck trying to handicap it. I'm just looking forward to the aftermath.
Sure. And Seattle, Tampa Bay in Germany. I love Seattle in this spot. I didn't see anything that led me to think that Tampa Bay has turned the corner. I think the reason that they were able to beat LA is because LA is just not playing well either. And Seattle is playing tremendous football. Their confidence is through the roof. And I'm getting 3 points in this spot. So, yeah, I love Seattle in this spot.
If Tampa Bay doesn't score in that last play with 10 seconds to go in the game and they lose the game, Seattle's the favorite in this football contest.
There you go.
And they would be the favorite because they're the better team. They're playing better football. I'm not going to forgive and accept this line because Tampa Bay rallied and scored a touchdown in the late stages of the football contest here. Tom Brady is going to be on a public relations tour there. He's going to be God to any football fan in Germany that relishes the National Football League. His mind will not be focused here. He's off of his divorce. He's going there as America's most eligible bachelor. And you've got a Seattle football team that's really fully focused in playing their best football of the year. I'm with you. I think Seattle wins this football contest.
Okay. Buffalo, Minnesota. It was shaping up to be an awesome matchup. But now, and we talked about it on the fantasy segment with Jared, and I kind of agree with Jared. I just kind of think that Josh Allen's not going to play on Sunday, and the line might even represent that.
I don't believe he's going to play either. Right now, the line is representing at 3.5. I mean, it's really come down, 9.5 open. So, we're likely to see this thing maybe even be less than 3 once the confirmation comes out.
By the way, if it's 3 and we get the backup rally for the backup quarterback, does Buffalo become a good play here?
Well, rallying around the quarterback is one thing, but do they have a reason to win this football game? Is there a pressing need for Buffalo here? I don't know if there's pressing need, but they could be a value play for sure if they lay less than 3 points in the contest. Because Minnesota is a little bit being a little bit popular right now because of their win-loss record in the game.
Yeah,
this is interesting here on NFL radio on Sirius Channel 88, which I listen to all the time. Dr. David Chow is a guest on there a lot, and he's their doctor that analyzes injuries. He's a doctor, and he can tell you exactly what's going on with it and how long the player should be out and so forth and whatnot about Josh Allen. And what his comment in this game was, it's really point blank simple. Would you risk playing Josh Allen in a game like this?
No.
If he's not even remotely close to being 100%? No way in the world would you do that. Okay, so that's why we're not going to see him.
Yeah.
And even if it's 3 weeks from now and he's still not 100%, you wouldn't risk doing that. So don't count on Josh Allen in this football game. You'll see this game around 3 when they kick it on Sunday.
By the way, I have Josh Allen on my fantasy team. I picked up Case Keenum this week, even though I have Aaron Rodgers as my backup. Because if Case Keenum plays, I'm playing him over Aaron Rodgers. So, and part of that has to do with the fact that the Packers are just playing so bad that I don't even know if Aaron Rodgers has given up. I know he talks a good game, but how do you play like that against Detroit? I don't know what's going on in Green Bay. I mean, it's almost like they're just so fed up that they did not. You know how everybody talks about like when the Jets lost Breece Hall and Joe Douglas took 2 seconds to make a trade with the Jags to replace him with James Robinson. What did they say? Well, hey, what did Joe Douglas say? Hey, I got to give my guys a chance. I got to do whatever I can to give my guys a chance to win. On the opposite side, you got the Packers who are doing the opposite. That they're not giving their team the best. They're not giving them players the best chance. If they would have sweetened the deal with Pittsburgh to make sure that they got Claypool and not Chicago, but they didn't do it. They said, "All right, if you want to go with Chicago, then go with Chicago." I mean, that has to trickle down to the players.
Well, it's all management. It dribbles down from there. We've seen this so long from Green Bay here. They don't draft for need. They draft because they feel this built-in component that they're going to develop players, okay? And they're going to become Green Bay Packers. They're not going to be players that came from another organization that have to be remolded. That's why you don't see trades for wide receivers to help Aaron Rodgers out any at all. It's ridiculous what goes on there.
Yep.
So what happens in a game like this, personally, I think the Green Bay Packers will come out here and play a really good football game.
Okay.
I really do. First of all, I'm not a big Dak Prescott fan. They're coming off a rest, and it's never boded well for Dallas doing just that. Prescott in his career, when he's favored by a touchdown or less against the NFC, has never beat the spread. He's 0-7 trying to do just that. And you've got a really nice role for Rodgers here. He's only been there 10 times in his career with Green Bay when the Packers have scored less than 10 points, single digits the previous game. He's 9-1 straight up and against the spread in the very next bounce back game, meaning that what goes down usually comes up as far as regression to the mean. I think you'll see Green Bay playing a really good solid football game, and I think they'll pull the upset here.
All right. Well, hey, there's been crazier things happening in the NFL this season, that's for sure. And that would change the season for Green Bay because there's still a chance for them to make the wild card, but they'd have to win games like this. They got to eventually start winning some football games.
For sure.
To wrap it up, my upset pick of the week is going to be the Chargers against San Francisco. That's basically because I'm getting a good team at plus 250. And I understand that San Francisco at this point looks like a better team, and there's no receivers for the Chargers. But the Chargers are still a very dangerous football team, and they're in the AFC, and the AFC is a better conference than the NFC. So I think they're probably the best. The other teams I was thinking about was actually I was thinking of going a little bit crazy with Washington because Philadelphia is undefeated, and maybe they'll lay an egg at some point. Because I noticed that Washington is 14-1 against the spread as an NFC dog of 8 or more points. Of course, I got that at Playbook Magazine, so I stuck with the spread instead of going too crazy on the 4-1 money line. But I felt the Chargers were kind of like an easy play because of the fact that I'm getting 250 with a good team.
What concerns me is two things here, Greg. Number one, Chargers have no running game at all. Their wide receivers are banged up. They have no running game at all. We don't know if Justin Herbert is 100% healthy here just yet. I talked with you off the air before we came on, and we were talking about that mind-blowing stat that the Pittsburgh Steelers have the smallest scoring play of any team in the National Football League. Their longest scoring play has been 8 yards. The team with the second smallest scoring play has been the LA Chargers. 23 yards has been their longest play for a touchdown this year.
With Justin Herbert at quarterback.
That's unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah, to say the least. So things are not hitting on all cylinders there right now in Los Angeles, and I'm a little bit concerned about that running game here. So that's the thing that puts up the stop sign for me.
Yeah, I was also thinking, Jacksonville intrigued me as well, because they already beat the Chargers on the road, another AFC West team. They've actually beaten 2 AFC West teams already this season out of the 3. And the Chiefs showed you against Tennessee with a terrible quarterback that they're vulnerable. So I was thinking, but I took the points instead of going with the money line.
Well, I think Tennessee's highly vulnerable in this football game here. You're going to ask Malik Willis to do something he hasn't done.
Is he going to start this week?
Yeah, the word I'm hearing is he is going to start. They're saying Tannehill might not play for another 2 or 3 weeks.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's the injuries that
if that's the case, then yeah, Denver is a much better play.
Yeah, well, if you can believe this, Denver's got the better offense. You look at the stats. Denver better offense, better defense. Tennessee has been just inside out completely. They get outgained every football game they play this year. Their offense is the 32nd worst offense in the National Football League. Is Tennessee.
Derrick Henry left, Derrick Henry right.
Yep, unbomelievable. So I think Denver's a real solid dog in this contest.
And the last thing I want to say is I think Cleveland, coming off the big win against Cincinnati, going to the bye, preparing for the Dolphins with an extra week. They know that this is it. If they're going to get a chance, they have to win a game like this. That Miami kind of got lucky last week. I think Cleveland's not a bad idea this week, getting 4 points.
I think they're a real good idea this week. I think they win this football game. Miami's coming home satisfied of back-to-back road wins. Cleveland's got this week of rest to get ready, and in the time they had off, they're getting a lot of people back. They're going to be as healthy as they've been all season long. Denzel Ward, a couple of other starters are back, and just by the way, I mentioned this in our podcast, our video cast, which we did earlier in the week, that the Cleveland Browns, by Pro Football Focus, happen to have the 2 players that are rated the highest in efficiency performance this year, offensively and defensively. Myles Garrett, the best defensive player rated by Pro Football Focus this year, and Joel Bitonio, their offensive guard, is the best offensive player in the National Football League. I thought it might have been Nick Chubb they were going to come at.
Yeah.
It's not. It's Bitonio. So there's talent on this football team.
Oh, what a difference they're going to be when Deshaun Watson starts playing.
For sure there will be, and they're healthy on top of it. So I think this has got upset-making written all over it for the Browns.
All right, Mark, that'll wrap it up. And Playbook Sports, we talked about Playbook Experts, the YouTube channel. What else you got going on with the website?
Well, right now, anybody that subscribes to any of our publications or services, I'll send you my free daily coffee club each and every day. It's in your inbox each and every morning. I kind of touch on the card each and every day. There's a lot of great insight in that. Check out everything we're doing at Playbook online at our website at playbooksports.com. And also check out that Playbook Experts YouTube channel for a lot of good free pick videos.
Mark, appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week, week 12 in college football, week 11 in the NFL.
Have a great week, Greg. Be well. Stay safe.